Actually, I'm from Silicon Valley, so even better, I think. I think I got you beat on the sun part. So thank you very much for coming. My name is Ben Riga. I am a technical evangelist with Microsoft. I work in a in a team called Developer and Platform Evangelism. And what we do is make developers successful. So that's kind of why I'm here. A couple of notes. My email address is on the screen. If you forget to ask a question today, or if you think of your question tomorrow or next week or whatever, please feel free to take note of my email address and reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help either answer your question or find the right person or point you in the right direction to answer your question. I am also on Twitter. Please follow me on Twitter. And I also have recently started a podcast series for developers that are kind of maybe a little bit beyond the basics, but not quite super technical. So I'm trying to give people maybe some tips and tricks to get your apps top ranked. In fact, some of the things that we're going to talk about today, I've actually included. So with that, I'll just say, oh, right. So please follow me on Twitter. If you don't follow me, the puppy gets it. So if you don't do it for me, do it for the puppy. So let me leave it there. Okay, so the topics for today, like I said, the area where I'm going to try and focus, the session is called Advanced Windows Phone Development, but in reality, it's probably more intermediate stuff. And what the stuff I'm going to talk about is more stuff that's beyond the hello world. Hopefully you've all gone beyond that. You know how to use Visual Studio and Silverlight. And we're going to talk about a few features that will help your app do better against your competitors' apps. And specifically live tiles and push notifications. And then we'll also talk about trial mode, which is a feature, especially if you have a paid app, you should not have a paid app without a trial mode. So I'll spend a few minutes talking about that, and I'll give you some examples. And then I've been spending the past couple of years working with developers on Windows Phone, and I've collected some tips around some of the things that will make apps more successful in the marketplace. And so we'll spend some time at the end talking about some technical stuff, but also some maybe not so technical stuff, but it's stuff that you have to do. One note, someone mentioned to me yesterday that the session in Eventboard, at least yesterday, was someone else's description, course description, and they talked about all sorts of Windows Phone stuff, but it also talked about PhoneGap. I'm not going to talk about PhoneGap here today. If you do have questions around PhoneGap, there are some folks over at the very other end of the conference center. There's a Windows Phone booth, and they can help you with that if you have any questions there. Was anybody here coming for PhoneGap? No? Okay, good. Okay, so like I said, we're going to spend some time talking about some of the things that make Windows Phone apps feel like native Windows Phone apps. And there's two things that are sort of prototypical that kind of define the experience, and they're sort of related. Live tiles is really the feature, and that is having the ability on the phone to turn it on, see if there's anything new that you need to look at, and if there isn't, you're gone. You're in, you're out, you just get your stuff done, you do it quickly. Now that's stuff that we've done. So for instance, I can see on this screen that there's 25 emails. Since the last time I checked, there's 25 new emails, 3 new text messages, and I've missed 2 calls, or there's 2 voicemails for me. That sort of information is important to an end user, and it gives them the ability to control what they need to do. Now, we do that, of course, in the native applications, and so end users expect you to do the exact same sort of thing in your own applications, and I'm going to talk about how that is done. You don't have to use push notifications to do live tiles. It is very convenient, though, and so we'll talk about how you can take advantage of push notifications. It does mean when you're doing push notifications that you do need a server side. Some server somewhere in the cloud, either in your data center, on a cloud site like Windows Azure or Amazon, or on a machine sitting under your desk in your bedroom. Doesn't matter. As long as you can get to the internet, you should be able to send a push notification and have tiles light up on end users' devices. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is live tiles. And the important thing about live tiles is that they give you this at-a-glance information. You should know that there are two different kinds of live tiles. You probably have noticed that already. If you've ever seen a Windows Phone, there's the smaller square tiles, like this flicker one and the phone one, and then there's the double wide one or the large one, which is like the calendar one here. As an ISV, as a third-party developer, you only have the ability to create the smaller ones, the square ones. The larger ones are kept for the first-party experience, like I said, the calendar, and also some of the OEM manufacturers and mobile operators have built apps where we've given them the ability to build those. But for the moment, you only have the ability to do the smaller ones. Keep in mind that when it comes to live tiles, the end user is always in control. No matter what we do in Windows Phone, we always put the consumer or the end user, the owner of that device, in complete control. And so there is no way for you to force the end user to put your app on their start screen. They always have the ability to put it on the start screen, and they also have the ability to take it off at any time and move it around and do whatever it is they want. If you're going to use things like push notifications and so on, you do have to ask permission of the end user because it is taking some of their resources. You're pushing information to them, possibly using toast notifications if you're using those, which can be intrusive. And so you want to make sure that you get permission, that you build this contract, if you will, between yourself and the end user. Building of tiles is kind of a template-driven idea. We actually kind of composite the tile for you. There are various aspects and things that you can change. Was there a question? Please, if you do have questions, please raise your hand. Someone told me yesterday, I did the pre-conference tutorial. How many people were at my pre-conference tutorial yesterday? No one. I told them not to come because I covered all this stuff yesterday. But they told me Swedish people are very shy and they don't ask questions. But in fact, yesterday I had tons of questions. So I encourage you to ask questions. Please raise your hand. If I don't notice you, interrupt me. The best way to get your question answered is for me to hear you. So please do that. Where was I? Oh, yes. So there's various properties of a live tile, and you can change any one of these. You can change one of them, and you don't have to do all of them. But if we look at them, and here specifically I'm looking at the front of a live tile, and essentially what we do is we start with a background. This is the background image. In this case, it looks like a caution sign with a C in the middle. That's just an image. And then on top of that, we put the title of the application. In this case, it's Contoso, and it's in a very specific location, 12 pixels in, 12 pixels up, and so on. And then in the top right-hand corner, you also have the ability to use our count, and that is a circle in whatever the accent color is. Usually it comes out in black. And that is a circle. It's 37 by 37, and it's, again, 12 pixels in, 12 pixels down, and so on. And so if you composite all of these together, you end up with what is a live tile. Like I said, you can use all of these. You can use one of them. And what we've started seeing lately is because these live tiles, and specifically the count, doesn't really look like a native experience. If I move back to the live tile here, the native experience for phone, for instance, has this great big number, 25, right? It's very obvious and clear. There is no easy way for you to do that using this data-driven template model. And so what many developers have started doing, and you're more than welcome to do this, is they don't use the title, they don't use the count, they build a bitmap image on the device or on the server, and then they put everything on there and it gets pushed. So in other words, I would build the bitmap image. If the number was 7, then I would have a great big 7 in an image. Did you guys get that? Make sense? So please feel free to do that. There's many apps that are doing that today. There's nothing wrong with it. In fact, in my opinion, it actually makes your app look a little better if you do that. It is a little bit more work. There are actually a few utilities out there that do it for you, but it does make for an experience that feels sometimes maybe a little bit more native. The other thing I mentioned here is that you may have noticed that your app, especially if you have an app which has a back to it, it has animations. Or you may have seen some of the other live tiles, for instance, the Xbox One or the People Hub one or the Pictures one. They all have these animations. those are not extensible. Your live tiles, you don't have control over any of the animations. That's completely controlled by the operating system for third-party apps. And so we may change that in the future, but for now, you really don't have any. And the reason for that is we really don't want this, neon signs on people's screens distracting them too much. We want to keep it as simple as possible so that, again, they get in, they can glance at the information, and they can get back out again. You can have multiple tiles. This is a new feature that we added in Mango, which is the release we just did, Windows Phone 7.5, back in the fall, October, November. Originally, we only had the ability to have one live tile for every application. Now you have the ability to have a primary live tile, which would be the one that most people would initially perhaps pin to their start screen. But you can also have secondary live tiles, first of all. And also you can have not just the front of a tile, but you can also put stuff on the back of a tile. And so again, that gives you control over all sorts of things, and it gives you just that, double the amount of space and more control over what you can do with that. And one of the things you can do is do things like allow different parts of your application to have direct shortcuts directly from the start screen. So for instance, in this example, we have a news application that maybe the primary tile would be it looks like MSNBC News. If I click on that, it would just take me to the home screen. But maybe I am a sports fanatic, or I want to stay on top of world news. What you can do is allow the end user to pin that particular section of your app directly to the start screen. And then when they click on that start screen, what you do is you give that tile, that secondary tile, a deep link so that when it starts, it doesn't go to your home screen, it goes directly into sports or world news or whatever, right? So that kind of, again, allows the end user to have a little bit more control, and it also encourages the end user to pin more of your app to their start screen, which means they will use your app more, which hopefully means that you'll either sell more apps because they will tell their friends, or you'll sell more advertising, whatever it is that you're doing, depending on your business model. The tile properties, I think I talked about some of these already. We saw the front of the tile earlier, but you can also do the back of the tile, which again has very similar capabilities. You have, again, a background on the back of the tile, which could be an image of whatever. You have a title, and then you also have content, which is basically a string in a fairly large font that makes it easy for people to read. When you do have the back of a tile, there is a flip animation that happens. It is completely up to the operating system as to when those flips happen, so that they can be made to look in a pleasing way. When you have all of these tiles on your start screen, they all will sort of behave properly. And again, you don't have any control over that. So basically, you'll have to adapt to that. Okay, so any questions so far? How am I doing? Is this interesting? Okay, all right. I see nodding of heads, so I'm going to take that as a good sign. Let's see. Let's start with this one. And so let me run this app, and then we can talk about what's going on there. So here is an app that doesn't do much. It's got a first page. It's also got a secondary page, which is a detail page. It doesn't have any text in it, but it's just for example. And so I'm going to add a tile to the screen, and it's already there probably. Cancel this. Yeah, it is. Okay, that's the problem with testing. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, so I'm going to add a tile. And you see what happened there. As soon as I clicked add a tile, and I'll show you the code for that in a couple of seconds, but you are able from within your app to add a tile, but the end user has control over that. So as soon as I try to add a tile, it immediately takes me to the start screen so that the end user sees what you've done. And that's basically, so again, always keeping the end user in control, and we don't get apps that start adding hundreds of tiles to the start screen behind the end user's back, right? So the end user always has that control. And so what I've done is I've added a tile. That tile actually has a deep link into that details page. And so if I click on it, it should take me not to my app, but to the detail page of the app. And you'll notice here that if I click the back button, it doesn't take me back to my home screen, it takes me out. That's the exact behavior you should expect. The same place you came into the app is where you should exit. Everyone with me? Make sense? Okay, and so the other thing we wanted to do is we wanted to actually, let me go back in here. So now we have a tile, we have that detail page. Now I'm going to schedule an update. And so I'm going to do that in the background. And that means that I can do it without having to set up a server or any of that sort of thing. Basically, I'm setting up a periodic task that periodic tasks, we're not going to talk about them today, but they're a background task that run on a regular schedule. You get about 15 seconds to do whatever it is you need to do every 30 minutes or so. It's not exactly 30 minutes, but on average it'll be 30 minutes. For the purposes of testing, it would be a pain if I started it and then we had to wait 30 minutes to see what happened. Similarly, if you did some changes, you'd have to wait 30 minutes to do that. And so there is a way for you to do that on a much more aggressive schedule. In this case, I think I'm doing it every half second. So we'll be able to see that much quicker. Again, you wouldn't be able to do that in production. If you tried to do that in production, your app would fail certification and you'd have to take that code out. And I'll show you that code in a second. So I'm going to schedule the update. And so now that has actually started the background task. And if I exit out and go back to my start screen, in a second, it's going to change the count on my live tile, and it should do it. It should give me just a random number, some number between 1 and 99, which is the only thing you can put in count. And so this is where I have to do a little dance because I have to wait for my app to actually do that. There is no consistency in how often or how quickly it's going to do that. It varies, and the operating system has full control. If it thinks it doesn't have time to do that update, it won't do the update, and so it'll just defer it. Oh, you don't think I clicked? Oh, let's try again. Yeah, it did. Should have. Let's see. Well, one thing we can do is we can just do this. Let's uninstall it, because I suspect it might have been. Let me do that with all of my. I was testing, obviously, earlier. And so let's just run it directly from here. Okay, yeah, it was running before. So it was in a different debug task. Okay, so let's just do this again. Add the tile, come back, and schedule the update. And now, yeah, it went right away. So what it did, it went too fast this time. Basically, it updated the count in the corner. You can see where it's 49. Again, it's a random number between 1 and 99. Obviously, depending on whatever scenario you're doing, you would normally do that. Now, again, if I wanted to do something interesting there, I would click on that. If you do put a count on your live tile, the end user is going to click on it and expect to see something related to that count. And so in this case, I'm not showing what that 49 is, right? I should be showing, 49 new messages or what have you. Let's actually have a look at the code. Stop this. Okay, so if we come back here, you'll see. So this is how, let me close this. Okay, so this is how I actually added a tile to the start screen. See if I can show you the whole thing there. So I'm looking for the tile. I have a variable shell tile, and then I'm using the shell tile class there to go and find my tile. And in this case, it's a tile which has the name show, right? And so I'm looking for that string in a tile somewhere. Each of your tiles is given a name, and so that way you can actually find them, and you can iterate through them. If you have, usually you don't know how many your end users will actually pin to the start screen. So we've done one. If it comes back null, that means we don't have a tile, and so there's nothing to be done. But if it doesn't, then we're going to use the standard tile data structure. We're going to change and add a title called dive deep, and then we're going to create it, right? And here we're giving it which page. So this is that deep link, so that when I click on it, this is where it's going to go. It's going to go to detailpage.xaml with a parameter show equal true, right? And then you can see here somewhere, yeah, right there, you can see that detail page, which is there. Any questions on that? It's really easy to create. In this case, it's a secondary tile. It's really easy to do that. Now, once that's created, then I am using, this is the method to actually launch that background process. Let me get that out of the way. I'm using a periodic task, giving it a description, and then if the agent is already there, I remove it because I'm going to add it again. And then I'm just going to add the task. And then this launch for test, that's that special command that I can use to make my background processes more frequent, so that I can test what's going on behind the scenes. And then once that's done, then you'll notice that in my solution, I actually have two projects. I have my live tile test. That's my foreground application that we were looking at. And then behind the scenes, I have this live tile agent, which really has one method, which you override, which is called onInvoke. And then, like I say, every 30 minutes for about 15 seconds, you can do whatever you want, assuming that you're not doing any UI. It has to be something in the background. And then here's what we're doing here. We're again looking for the tile. And then if the tile is not equal to null, that means we do have a tile. Then we're finding a random number and then setting the count here, right? Setting the count to that random number. And then updating the tile. And that's really all it takes to update a tile. Now you can do it in the foreground. You probably should do it in the foreground sometimes, depending on what's going on. But you can also do it in the background. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? It's really easy, so you should take advantage of it. It's something that will make your application much more native feeling, and it will make you look better than your competitors. So I strongly encourage you to do that. Again, it's probably the defining feature for Windows Phone, and so you should take advantage of that. How am I doing on time? Wow, I'm going too slow. Let's pick up the pace a little bit. The other thing that you can do, so what we were doing here is we were running this live tile updating in the background. And that means every 30 minutes for 15 seconds or whatever amount of time it takes for me to do that, that thing is running. Whether night or day, as long as the device is on, that's running. And it's also, in many cases, it's probably polling or doing some sort of activity. That will work in many scenarios. It's not the most efficient because it is a polling method and it runs whether it needs to or not. And so for a device, it's not efficient because you do have these tasks that are running. So if you have scenarios where you need to do stuff from externally, perhaps checking some scenario, the example I always give is one of perhaps stock trading, where you're checking a stock price, and if it goes above a price, you may want to sell, or if it goes below, you may want to buy or whatever. And so you want to let the end user set up some parameters, and then when there are triggers or events or something interesting, you want to alert the end user via a notification. And so in that case, you need to do more of the work on the server side in the cloud somewhere. Again, in your server under your desk, or in Windows Azure, Amazon, what have you. And it does enable some really interesting scenarios, because you can pretty much do anything you want on the server, and then when you're ready, you just push that information to the end user via any one of a number of different ways to do that. Now we're going to talk about pushing live tiles, but you can also push a toast notification, and you can also send raw messages from the server to the device. So let's talk about how you set up push notifications, because there are a number of different pieces that you have to understand in the architecture. It's pretty simple once you get it, but it can be a little bit, because it is not something that everyone has done. So when the application starts on the client side, on the device, your application will actually request to open up a channel or an endpoint with the service. We actually have a hosted service somewhere out on the cloud, in Windows Azure actually. And so at some point, the device, your application will communicate to the server, and there's standard APIs. I'll show you how that works in a couple seconds. It will talk to the MPNS, Microsoft Push Notification Service. It will talk to MPNS and say, I need a channel because I'm expecting to get notifications. And the service will say, okay, I know who you are now. Here is the channel for you. And it basically gives the device a very long URL that your server can then use to push information to that device. And so what you need to do then is go again from the device now to your server. And the device now goes to your third-party service and says, hey, anytime you need to send me any information via the push notification service, here's my URI. And that's the way you do that. And now we're set. The device is not doing anything. Hopefully the server is checking, again, if we use the stock price examples, checking stocks every hour, every minute, every second to see if stuff happens. And then at some point, there is an event that's triggered, and your server wants to send a message to that device. And so the way that happens then is that the server then sends a message to the MPNS server. Actually, it uses the URI, which then goes through the MPNS server. And then the MPNS server, because it's maintaining an open connection, because it has a channel that's always open with that device, and it knows the endpoint, it will then send that push notification message to the device. Does that make sense? So the question in terms of dollars or kroner, you mean? That's a really good question. So the question was, what does it cost me in terms of battery time and power and performance and all that stuff? Let me answer the other question that I thought you were asking, which is, does it cost me anything to use the Microsoft Push Notification Service? The answer is no. That's completely free. We maintain those servers. Of course, you're going to have your own server in the cloud somewhere. You're going to have to pay for that. In terms of performance and battery power and so on, it is fairly minimal to keep the channel open. But if you're sending a lot of messages, that means you're turning the radio on and sending a message. And turning the radio on and using the radio to do data is probably the most expensive thing you have on a device. And so if you're sending too many messages, you're draining the battery. There is actually a limit for every connection, every endpoint between your server and an app on the device. You can send a maximum of 500 messages a day. You can actually go beyond that by requesting it. You have to get a certificate and so on. You can go beyond that. But reality is that if you're sending 500 messages a day, you're going to drain the battery. There's just not the devices don't have batteries unless you have the old Motorola phones that have the huge brick for a battery. So there is a penalty. The penalty is not to maintain the channel open. It is when you're sending a lot of messages, and it's the same thing. It's less than if you were doing polling, right? Because if you were doing polling, then that device would have to go and check the server every 30 minutes or whatever, or every 30 seconds. And in fact, it would be really expensive to do that. That's a good question. Thanks. Any other questions? Sure. Yes. So the question is, via the arrow, it looks like that server, that's my third-party service, is actually sending information to the device. It's not. It's sending an acknowledgement, probably. But no, you would never go directly from your server to your device. You always go through the MPNS. And the reason you do that is because the MPNS is doing that maintaining of that channel open. And it doesn't do it just for your app. Hopefully, end users have more than one channel open at a time. And so the push notification service on the service, as well as on the device, are optimizing, right? They're maintaining and sending messages regularly and bunching them up so that we're optimizing for the health of the device and the experience of the end user. That's a good question. Any others? Okay. So let's keep going. There are actually 3 different kinds of notifications. The simplest one is the raw notification, and that's basically when you just want to send a payload directly from your server to your app. That only works if your app is in the foreground. If your app is not in the foreground, the message just doesn't get sent. So you're delivering directly from your app, and then the end user doesn't see it, right? It's all behind the scenes. Your app would react and have event handlers and so on to receive that raw notification. The next one is probably the most intrusive one. It's called a toast. And just like toast popping out of a toaster, it's essentially toast that pops up at the top of the device and gives the end user a message that says something, hey, time to go and buy stock or sell stock or what have you, right? So it's very intrusive. It's something that you would only use when you absolutely need to alert the end user to do something, to take some action or do something. It's what you would get when, for instance, you get a text message. That's what you see across the top of the screen is a little toast. You do have to ask permission and allow the end user to opt in to toast messages, and you always have to allow the end user to opt out again if they change their mind. And so keep that in mind as you're building it. The one we're going to talk about today is tile. So we just saw how you can update your tile in the background using a process or in the foreground. It's the same concept. Just basically sending information. You can do the same thing via push notification. And in fact, what you would probably do is perhaps a combination of toast and tile. And the reason you would do that is because when you send a toast, if the end user is maybe they're driving or something and their phone's in their pocket and they miss that toast, it's gone. You can't go back and look at what toasts you've missed. And so you would use the combination of the toast and the tile together to alert the end user that there's something that they need to do, right? The toast is something that's immediate. The tile is something that stays around and allows the end user to take some action at some point in the future. Does that make sense? Okay. There was one other thing. Oh, right. So if your app is in the foreground and you send a toast message, the toast message does get sent, but the actual toast banner that goes across the screen doesn't show up. So the end user doesn't see it. And so if you do get a toast from your app, from your server to your app in the foreground, then you have to set up an event handler that says, oh, I got a toast, and then you would handle it somehow. The reason for that is it just doesn't make sense for the server to interrupt the end user to go into an application that they're already in, right? And so you would have to do that in your app in some way. The tile, when it gets sent, doesn't launch the application or anything. It just updates the tile in the background. The end user doesn't know or hear or do anything. It just kind of happens in the background. And so there's nothing to be done there. How long is it? I think it's like 10 seconds or 12 seconds. The question was, how long does the toast stay on the top of the screen? And I think it's about 10 seconds or so. And it can be dismissed, but it's about 10 seconds. You cannot get it to stay. No, once it's gone, it's gone. And once it's there, you've got to read it or move on. Okay. So let's have a look at creating a push notification. And let me uninstall this because I have this background process that's running in the background, which we don't need. Okay. So let me run it, and then once we see what it does, we can actually... So a couple of things have happened here. The app has now, as soon as I clicked it and ran it, it started, and the first thing it does is it sends a message to the MPNS servers, and it says, hey, I need a channel, please. And the MPNS server has come back and says, sure, here's your URI. And there's the URI. In this case, it's live.net domain, and I can do something with that. And so normally, I would have a server somewhere that's standing up waiting for me to do that. In this case, I don't. I'm just going to use a just standard web page that's running on my laptop. I don't have a server on my laptop or anything. I'm just going to send it directly from my laptop, and I'm going to pretend I'm the server. And so I need that push notification URI, so let me go and find it. Not only do I put it on the screen, but I also copied it into the output window. So let me just cut that and paste it directly up here. So we're going to use that in a minute. So here is that URI. And so now we're going to, before I do that, it makes no sense to send a tile notification if the tile is not on the screen. So let me just pin it to the start. Okay, so that's so what it's done there is it's given me the default tile, which has that starburst. That's the standard default tile that every app has. Hopefully you change that. And then it's giving me the application name. And so we're going to do something different. We're going to change the front tile, and we're going to say, hey, look at me. That's what I used earlier. We're going to enter the front background image. And so I have a bunch of images that are just basically colors, right? So I'm going to say the front one is called, green.jpg. That's just a JPEG, which is just pure green. And then I'm going to put something on the front that says just a number. And then I can do the same thing on the back and say the back title is, let me see, back me up. And then make the back red. And I can also put something in the back that does that. And so now I've got some information. And I'm going to basically package that up into an XML package and send it. And if I was smart, I would have, I went too fast. Sorry, I should have brought the thing up first. And so it sent it, and now we have our tile notification. You saw how quick that was. It was actually faster than I could go and switch from one to the other. There's no guarantee of time or delivery, but typically it's pretty quick, almost immediate, almost always. Any questions there? Do you guys want to see the code? You're supposed to say yes. Yeah, okay. It's not much fun if you don't actually look at the code. Otherwise, it's just me doing tricks. Yeah, so the question was this actually using the push notification service? Yes, in fact, if you look at what I did, you see that URI. So when I packaged up this XML, I sent it as a post message to that URI. It's an HTTP request. I'm just sending it, and that URI is actually the MPNS server, right? No. This is a server actually in the cloud. It's live. It's working. It's the same one you would use in production. It's very fast response. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Anyone else have any other questions? Okay. Good. Yes, I did get a response. Error, device is not ready, failed. I mean, there's all sorts of responses. Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely you will know. Yeah. It's because if it doesn't work, you may want to batch it up and try it again 5 minutes later or whatever, right? I mean, yeah. Okay, so let's have a look at that code. This is still running, so let me just stop that. Okay, so let's see, where do we start? Let's look at my main app. So my main page doesn't really have anything here. The only thing it has is when my app starts, I open up a channel. And so here's where I'm doing that, right? I'm opening up a channel, finding the channel name, and if it's null, that means I don't have a channel yet. Then we're going to create a new connection. And in this case, my app was not installed, so there was no channel. So it's actually going to do this. And then it's going to set up some event handlers. It all happens in the background asynchronously and so on. Do this so that maybe we can see more of this. So I'm setting up a couple of event handlers. One is the channel URI updated. That means my connection is now open. My URI is available for me to do something with it. And we'll see that in a second. Or something happened. Something bad happened. And so I have error occurred. And then at some point, I say open. And then I say bind to shell tile. And in this case, the bind to shell tile says any messages coming back on this push notification service, live tile information that comes back, I want you to send it to my tile. And you have the option of sending it, in this case, by having nothing in the parentheses, it means send it to my primary tile, the one that the end user pins. If I had a secondary, I would have to actually tell it which one I wanted it to work with. Does that make sense? Okay, and then at some point, here's the URI was updated. So that's when it comes back and gives me that big long URI. And this is where you saw I actually posted it into the output. I'm just using just a diagnostic message that I send it to my debug window. And then I popped a window up. Now, obviously, You wouldn't do this in production. This is just me doing it so that I can show you what's going on. It doesn't make sense for you to post the URI the end user doesn't need to see that URI. They don't care. They shouldn't care. You don't even care what it is. It's just a location, right? And then there's an error occurred, right? And then at some point, that's pretty much it. There's not really anything else that you need to do. The other thing that we can see is how, I think I have it up here. Here it is. Here's how we actually send the tile. So, right, that, this is that page that we had, right? I closed it, but the page that we had where we were able to enter all that information, that's just an ASPX page that's running on my local host server here on my machine. And then the code behind on that, as soon as I click that send button, it grabs a bunch, again, sorry, my screen is not big enough at this resolution to show you everything. So here is what we're doing. We're grabbing what that URI is because we're going to use that. And then we basically create a web request. We tell it what it's going to be a post message. And then we build our payload, right? And the payload is essentially an XML document that we assemble from all that information that we had, right? And so there's the text from the background image and the count and the title text and all of that good stuff. And then we take that and we encode it into a message. We give the message some parameters, and then we send it. And that's pretty much it. And then if an exception happens at some point, you would get it. I'm just doing a catch, so I'm not really looking for the different ones. But here's the various status messages that we get back. Any questions on that? Again, it's pretty straightforward. Yes? So the yeah. So what happens is, let me go through this again because it's kind of important, and I'm glad you asked. If you don't get it, I'm glad you asked. So when my application launches, I check if I already have a channel, because if my application is already running, and if I have a channel, I don't need to create another one. The channel's already there waiting for me. If I don't, in the case of our example where we're just launching the app for the first time, there is no channel available. So I go to the MPNS server and say, I need you to open a channel for me. And that allows you an endpoint that you can then use. And the MPNS server says, okay, I'm giving you a channel, and here it is. It's this long gobbledygook text message that says, here's your channel that you can use. You send that as a text to my server, and my server then says, okay, anytime I need to send a message to that device, maybe I've authenticated myself and it knows if I need to send a message to Ben Riga, then there's the address. And then what it does is it says, okay, now I have an update to send. Let me package up that XML document, and I send it to that address, that HTTP address, just like you would. It's just a standard post message. That address is actually in our service, and then we take care of the stuff behind the scenes to make sure that it shows up on the device. Is that clear? Yes. It's part of your logic, right? Correct. Correct. And it's going to vary. Every scenario is different, right? So, for instance, again, coming back to that stock trading example, I might say, hey, I want to check anytime Microsoft stock goes over $50, that's time for me to sell, so, right? And so Ben Riga, well, maybe I've authenticated. Ben Riga, I have my account information, and here's my trigger point, Microsoft, $50. And if that happens, here's my URI. And then the server is doing stuff in the background, checking my stocks and all that stuff, and at some point says, oh, look, Microsoft stock is now $51. Time to send Ben a message. Make sense? Okay. Any other questions? So let's... The last thing I wanted to talk about is trial mode. And it's if you're building an app that's going to be a paid app, I strongly suggest that you add trial mode. It's something that no other platform has. And we've seen anecdotally, I'll give you some of the numbers later, but anecdotally, it's just probably one of the easiest way for you to increase the number of downloads. And not only just number of downloads, but also number of apps that get bought. It's really easy to do. It's the easiest thing. And there is this sort of invisible barrier. If an end user has to give you 99 cents, even if it's just 99 cents, there's a barrier there that says, well, I'm not sure I want to spend 99 cents just to try this app. Maybe it's not very good. Maybe it's great. Maybe it's not great. I don't know. So I'll go look somewhere else. So by making a trial mode, you basically are eliminating any sort of barrier between you and the end user. You're saying, yeah, go ahead and try it. It costs you nothing. If you don't like it, nothing lost, right? And so that makes it very easy for the end user to try your app. And anecdotally, we know that is very effective. And it's really easy to do. Actually, it's, I would say, bordering on trivial. There is an API, a license information it's called. And you new up license information in your app, and then you check. In this case, I called it info.isTrial. If that comes back as true, your app is in trial mode. If it comes back as false, then it's great because the app has been bought. And so it's actually really easy to do. The one thing that you have to be careful, though, is, did you have a question? Was that too easy? Oh, okay. He got excited. Okay. Couldn't tell why. The one thing I would suggest that you do is that you test, right? And it's actually kind of hard to test because the license information only comes from the marketplace, right? It's part of the license that the end user has on their device. And so you don't have that until your application is actually certified and in the marketplace, and you go to the marketplace and download it, and you get that certificate. And so I have some examples of things that you can do to actually test that. So let me come back here. How am I doing on time? Wow, I'm going too slow. Okay, let's just run this. And so you see here what I've done is basically I pop up a window that says, we're now running an app that's in trial that has the ability to do trial mode. And so if I click OK here, then the app will run as if it's been paid for, it's bought. If I click cancel, it runs as if it's been in trial mode. And so let me just click OK. And now if I look at my content, you can say, hey, it's been bought. And if I run it again, here it is, and I write cancel, we're on trial, right? So let me show you how I did that. It's pretty trivial. It's in, no, so this is my, no, that's not it either, actually. Oh, it actually happens at the very beginning of when my app launches. It's in the app.xaml, and essentially I pop up a message box that asks that question, and then based on the result, then I set my own variable, which I call trial cache. I set it to false or true when I'm in debug mode. And what that means is when I'm in release mode, and you can only be in release mode when you're actually shipping to the marketplace, you can see that I do something a little bit different, which is I actually use the licenseinfo.isTrial. You see what I did there? And so by doing that, then I can test while I'm in my debugging mode, and I can actually get the real thing when I'm in production. Kind of handy, and I would strongly suggest it. The other thing that it does is it caches. You only need to check this in a few places. You need to check it when the app launches and when you come back from being dormant or tombstoned, because the end user might have exited your app, gone and paid for the app, and then come back and then say, hey, I should now be getting all my new levels to my game, or I should be getting my new content, or turning off advertising, whatever it is that you've done. And so you need to check that in a few places. You don't want to check it too often because there is a penalty to checking that license information. It's, I don't know, 50, 60 milliseconds. But if you do it too often, there's a penalty to pay. And I remember when we first launched, these people were writing games, and the games were great when you were in debug mode, and then they would deploy to the marketplace, and they were checking license info like once every second. And so suddenly you have this pause, and they couldn't figure out why. So anyway, this actually resolves that. The other thing that I didn't mention is, and this is not really related to trial mode, but if you are writing an app, I strongly encourage you to ask for your money, right? Make sure that the end user can get to the marketplace directly from your app. Don't expect them to go to the marketplace and search for your app again and then buy it and then come back, right? So it's really easy. There's one API call. I'll show you in a second. You should do that. And as long as you're doing that, also encourage your end user to rate your app. And again, these are really easy things, and they're things that actually, the more ratings you have, the higher you go in the rankings. The higher you go in the rankings, the more downloads you get. The more downloads you get, the more money you make. It's really a simple formula. Let me just come back here and show you. Sorry, that is in main page. This is how easy it is to launch the marketplace page for your app, right? It's 2 lines, right? Newing up a marketplace review task and then showing it. And then newing up a detail task. The detail task is where you would go to rate the app. Detail task is where you go to buy. The review task is where you go to rate. Makes sense. And then you just show it. It's really that easy. And then your app will get tombstoned and then come back. And so that's really all there is. Any questions on that? I have a lot more content that I'm not going to be able to get to because I'm almost out of time. I did want to go through a sort of a top countdown, 7, because it's Windows Phone 7, of things that you should be thinking about. The first one is absolutely, if you have a paid app, absolutely use the free trial API. The information that we're seeing from the marketplace, an app that doesn't have trial versus an app that does have a trial, 70 times, not 70%, 70 times more downloads. And of those downloads, about 10% of those, 10% of them will convert to paid. And so if you do the math, that means you're getting about 7 times more sales just by adding what is really a few lines of code. So again, I strongly encourage you to do that. Some things to keep in mind, you have to, when you're in trial mode, you essentially want to limit your app in some way. You don't have to, but that's kind of what it's there for. And so you have to be careful that you don't limit it too much so that the end user doesn't understand what your app is doing, but you also don't want to give away too much value. And again, that's something you're going to have to decide. If you're writing a game, you might limit the number of levels or the amount of time that the end user can play or what have you. If you're doing something else, you might want to limit functionality, or you can do anything you want. The one thing that I would caution you to be careful of is time. Some people say, well, you can only use my app for 7 days or 10 days or 14 days, whatever. And that's fine. The problem is that because you have your own private sandbox for your app, the end user could actually uninstall your app, reinstall it, and then get another 7 days, 14 days, right? So, and don't underestimate, some end users will do that. Even for 99 cents, they will do that. And so you just want to make it easy for them not to be able to do that. And so don't use time-based unless you don't care, right? I mean, that might be the only way. The other thing you can do is you can incorporate ads into your trial version. Allow your trial version to be completely free, but you have ads, right? So you can do that sort of thing as well. The other thing, we talked about this earlier, live tiles. Again, it's the defining feature for Windows Phone. So try and use live tiles wherever possible. We do know that end users want live tiles. So if you do have a live tile, make sure that you put it in the description in Marketplace, because they will be looking for that. And don't expect them to install the app and then play with it to see if they like the live tile. By actually putting it in the description and possibly if your live tile is compelling enough, perhaps even having a screenshot on your marketplace so that you have that. And then make it stand out, right? Spend the time on the graphics, make the live tile look good, because that's what end users are looking for. If you are doing any sort of advertising, try and use the Pub Center ad control. It is not available in every market around the world, but we're up to, I think we're up to 10 or 15 markets at this point. And it is, in terms of advertising, from what I've seen and what I've heard, probably one of the most effective and most efficient in terms of paying of developers. The eCPM that you would get from Pub Center, again, from what I've heard anecdotally from developers, is higher than what you would get from other vendors. There is nothing preventing you from using Google or AdMob or whoever you want. But again, I would strongly add to that. If you do location services as part of the ad, you can enable that. And if you do that, you actually get higher eCPMs. So try and do that. Again, don't do that without letting your end user know. But that does give you a little bit more of a bang. How am I doing on time? I'm almost out of time. If you are pushed, if you've now published your app into the marketplace, you're not done, right? You've done half the work. You've done all the hard work, which is the coding and the testing and the publishing and all that good stuff. But you do actually have to do some additional work to make sure that you're getting the biggest bang for your buck. The two things that people seem to forget about is price and categorization of the app. The end user has to be able to find the app, and it sometimes can be hard to figure out where to put your app in the marketplace. And so you have to test that. And the way you do that is by publishing and then looking at your publishing, your download numbers and your paid numbers. And do A/B testing. Find markets that are similar. For instance, US and Canada, consumers behave very similarly. Or Austria and Germany, they behave very similarly. Australia, New Zealand. And put your app, the same app, in two different markets with perhaps two different prices or two different categories, and then see what happens. And then if you do that, you will find that you will actually be able to maximize. The idea is you're not trying to get the most number of downloads. You're trying to get the most amount of money. And so to do that, the higher the price is, the fewer downloads you need to get to make more money, right? I mean, it's just math. So anyway, do your A/B testing. It's pretty straightforward. It's something you should think about. Publish and localize globally. When we first released Windows Phone, I think we were in 10 or 11 markets. We're now in 63 different countries around the world. And clearly not all of them are going to speak Swedish. And so I would encourage you to localize your app. It's actually pretty easy. We've given you some pretty good tools in Visual Studio. It does require more work. Obviously, you need to go and find a friend that speaks French and another one that speaks German and another one that speaks Spanish and so on. But you will find that end users want that. Obviously, they just like you and me, we want our apps to be in our local native language. So try and take advantage of that. Again, it's one way that you can differentiate yourself from your competitors. So go ahead and do that. Release early and often. This is another thing that I'm seeing developers that are not used to building apps on mobile. They want to build the whole app right away and release it in one big chunk. Once a year I'm going to do an update. And that's not the way it works in mobile. The way it works is you release apps fast, right? Build the app, get some value in, put it in the marketplace, see what happens, and then do a quick turn, right? And by doing that, every time you actually update, you actually get another chance at the marketplace rankings, because it will show up as, oh, here's a new app. Here's a new app. And by doing that, you will get more downloads. I just saw a case study. It was a news article from an app. It was called Taptitude. And they release every week, no matter what. They're releasing every week. They put themselves on a treadmill. And by doing that, they're making a lot of money. They basically have raised their rankings, and now they're just there, right? And they know that their end users will come back once a week to see. It's an app that has they have, 20, 30 mini games, and every week they add a new one or they change something and they fix a bug. And so by doing that, they give themselves more opportunity. Yeah, so what else? Yeah, so basically what most developers or many developers do is they wait for the app to be completely finished. And reality is that you can do interim releases because you don't have to worry about going and uninstalling and reinstalling because the marketplace does that for you. The end user will update. It's very easy and trivial to do that. So just go ahead. If you're building a game, release the first 3 levels and then release the next 3 in 2 weeks, and so on. So again, release early and often. And the last thing is, I don't know that we're going to have time to talk about this now, is try and get yourself promoted. It's probably the number one thing you can do to increase your sales. If you look at the marketplace app itself, there are a number of categories or a number of places, a number of slots that we have where we actually promote applications. There's the primary slot, which we call the panorama. It's kind of up front in the center and very visible. There's the featured slot, where you have just an icon and the title. And then if you click that more button, then there's the featured list. And each one of those will actually give you a huge amount of uplift. If you're in that panorama page, you'll get about 20 times more downloads, which is quite significant. If you're in the featured icon, you're going to get about 8 times more downloads. And in the feature list, about 1.5 more downloads. So I was going to spend time talking about what it takes to get promoted. We have a whole team that does nothing but marketplace merchandising, and they look for apps, and they're always looking for great apps to make sure that we delight our end users. I'm going to leave this up here, but basically what you should be doing is trying to delight the end user, trying to do a number of things. You want to have that core functionality. You want to have content quality and ease of use. That's kind of a baseline. Those are the things that every app should be striving for. Above that, you want to add utility, so a deep feature set or visually very impactful. You're doing something that has the end user coming back over and over again for some reason, whatever that might be. You're doing something that's really original. Those are the types of things they're looking for. And then finally, they're looking for something special, whether it's some wow effect, something that you've done that just makes your app stand out. And then design language. You want to make sure that your app, if it looks and behaves like a Windows Phone app, you're more likely to get featured. I still see apps in the marketplace today where it's so clear that the developer has spent no time trying to design for Windows Phone. They've basically taken all their graphics from their iOS app and put it into the Windows Phone. I guarantee you those apps are not going to get featured because they just don't look and feel. And from an end user perspective, it feels foreign. Might feel great on the iOS, but if you have an iOS app on a Windows Phone, it doesn't feel natural. And so try and stick to the design language. And then last, take advantage of all the platform features. We're obviously doing things like live tiles and push notifications, integrating into the hub, and so on. So those are the things that we're looking for. And I'm going to stop there. I ask that you please save the puppy. Follow me on Twitter. My name is Ben Riga, and you can follow me at Ben Riga. And then I also mentioned earlier on, if you didn't get a chance to ask your question, maybe you're shy or whatever, or you maybe remember the question tomorrow, please take note of my email address. I'm more than happy to help. It's my job to make sure that you're successful and you make a lot of money and have a lot of fun on the platform. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to stick around if you have questions. I do have to catch a train in a little while, but if you have specific questions, we can chat. Thank you.